Hello, thank you for joining me. I'm Tom Booker, the senior instructor, and this is our Warrior Personal Strength lesson on Indomitable Spirit. And what we'll be talking about today, wrapping up Indomitable Spirit together today, we'll be talking about what Fred learned about applying Indomitable Spirit. Now, during our past few lessons, we've been talking together about understanding and applying Indomitable Spirit as our warrior personal strength. Indomitable Spirit is a tenet of Taekwondo, one of the fundamental principles, the basic truths we learn and apply when we study the martial arts. This is a personal strength of our will. Indomitable Spirit is our confidence and determination to set worthwhile long-term goals for ourselves, goals that may take us many years to achieve. We maintain a strong sense of our long-term purpose and the value of what we have set out to do. We understand that our life is a marathon, it's not a sprint. We keep striving to achieve our goals when we're facing adversity, obstacles, challenges, and setbacks. We're willing to try new ideas and new approaches to overcome adversity, to learn and apply new skills, and to move outside our comfort zone. Other related words for indomitable spirit, ways people describe this personal strength, are stout-hearted, purposeful, backbone, guts, grit, and resilience. Opposites for this personal strength are powerless, spiritless, spineless, gutless, faint-hearted, aimless, and apathetic. None of these are considered to be positive qualities. To help us understand this warrior personal strength better, we've looked at 4 different situations in which Frederick Douglass learned to develop and apply indomitable spirit. The very first came about as Fred learned how to read. Fred was born in 1818 in Talbot County, Maryland, on the eastern shore of the Chesapeake Bay. He was born a slave. At first, he wasn't really sure what that meant. But as he grew older, he found out for himself. He learned from personal experience that life as a slave could be harsh, and it could be cruel. Fred first moved to Baltimore in 1826 when he was just 8 years old. He lived with Hugh and Sophia Auld. He helped to look after their 2-year-old son, Tommy. After listening to Sophia read the story of Job from the Bible one evening, he asked her to teach him how to read. She agreed, and for the next few weeks, she taught Fred the letters of the alphabet and how to spell out a few words of 3 or 4 letters. Fred worked hard and he learned quickly. Sophia was so proud of him that one day she had Fred read aloud for her husband Hugh to show him how well Fred was learning. Instead of being pleased, Hugh became very upset, even angry. He told Sophia that teaching Fred to read was wrong. Fred was a slave. All he needed to know was how to obey the commands of his master. Learning to read would forever unfit Fred to be a slave. Sophia must stop teaching him at once. Fred was more determined than ever to learn how to read, even though Sophia wouldn't teach him any longer. Slowly, with great effort, he built on the little bit he already knew to learn more. He learned from Tommy Auld's used spelling books. He picked up old newspapers in the street to practice reading. He traded biscuits with some of his friends in the neighborhood for their help. By the time he had turned 15, in 1833, Fred could read as well as many of his friends, and better than most. Fred continued to develop and strengthen his indomitable spirit as he learned to resist the bullying and cruelty of Edward Covey, the slave breaker. When Fred was sent to work for Edward Covey on his farm, he knew nothing about farm work. He made many mistakes as he tried to learn new skills. Every time Fred made a mistake, Covey scolded him and beat him. Fred was hurt and frightened. He didn't know what to do. One hot afternoon in August, as they were working together to thresh the wheat, Fred collapsed from heat exhaustion. Covey yelled at him and kicked him as he lay on the ground, too weak and ill to protect himself. After Covey left, Fred recovered enough strength to slip away into the nearby woods to hide. He stayed away for a couple of days before he went back to the farm. The first day, nothing happened. The next day, Covey snuck up on Fred while he was working and tried to tie him up so that he could beat Fred again. But this time was different. Fred resisted Covey. He kicked out of the rope, blocked Covey's strikes, and they grappled together in the farmyard. Fred was determined that Covey wouldn't beat him this time, and he was equally determined not to harm Covey. So the fight went on and on for what felt like hours. Fred and Covey took each other to the ground many times. When Covey tried to grab for a heavy stick to beat him, Fred threw him face first into the manure pile. Over and over they grappled each other, grabbing, pushing, pulling, twisting with all their strength, until they were both exhausted. In the end, Covey just gave up. He backed away from Fred, proclaimed that he had really won, and then staggered off. He never admitted that Fred had stood up to him and made him back off, but he never tried to beat Fred again. Fred drew on Indomitable Spirit as his personal strength again when he first tried to escape from slavery and failed. Fred resolved that 1836 would be his freedom year. He would escape from slavery. He and 4 close friends planned to take a log canoe and sail north up the Chesapeake, then strike out overland on foot for Philadelphia. It was a daring, risky plan, and they all knew it, but they were determined to face the risks. They never got the chance. Fred and his friends were betrayed. Just a few hours before they were set to start, they were seized by a posse of county constables and thrown in jail. After a few days, his friends were released, but not Fred. He was alone, except for the slave traders. They came into the jail to look Fred over. They did their best to frighten Fred. They taunted him and they sneered at him. They told him how hard and hopeless life would be for him when he was sold south to work in the cotton fields. They laughed and joked about all the money they would make by selling him south. Fred didn't say much. There was nothing he could do but wait. He dreaded being sold south. but he wasn't going to show his fear to the slave traders. Finally, it took all the indomitable spirit Fred could muster to try again, to face the dangers, escape, and claim his liberty. Instead of selling Fred south to the cotton fields, Thomas Auld sent him back to Baltimore to live with Hugh and Sophia. Thomas told Fred that if he stayed out of trouble and learned a skilled trade so that he could support himself, he would grant Fred his freedom when he turned 25. Fred went to work in the shipyards and he learned to be a caulker. But Fred knew that as long as he was still a slave, he was in danger. What if Thomas didn't keep his promise? What if he died? What good would his promise be then? Fred resolved to take matters into his own hands. He would claim his own liberty. Waiting years for Thomas to give it to him was just too risky. After just 3 weeks of planning and preparation, and with the help of a few close and trusted friends, Fred escaped. Disguised as a merchant sailor, Fred boarded the new steam railroad train in Baltimore. If all went well, it would take him north to Philadelphia and then on to New York. And if something went wrong, Fred knew what would happen then. It was frightening, but he made himself face it. He thought about it every moment of the long trip north. Someone would recognize him and turn him into the bounty hunters. They were always on the alert for escaping slaves. If they caught him, this time they would sell him south for sure. He had several very close calls, but no one stopped him or turned him in. Fred made it all the way to New York without being caught. He was tired, hungry, homeless, and almost broke. He was a complete stranger. He didn't know anyone. As a fugitive slave, he was a permanent exile from his home, from everything and everyone he had ever known. He could never go back. But Fred had finally done it. He had claimed his liberty, and he meant to keep it. Now, we have some final questions about Indomitable Spirit. The first, Hugh Auld had forbidden Sophia to teach Fred any longer, but Fred wouldn't give up. He decided to take what Sophia had taught him and to continue learning to read on his own, even though he knew it would be very hard. Do you think he was applying Indomitable Spirit to overcome a setback? 2. After Fred stood up to Covey and grappled with him in the farmyard, Covey never tried to beat him again. Do you think he respected Fred's indomitable spirit? Or was he a bully who couldn't admit that Fred had stood up to him and made him back off? 3. Fred was seized and thrown in jail for planning to escape from slavery. The slave traders taunted Fred about how hard life would be for him in the cotton fields far to the south. Fred dreaded being sold south, but he wasn't going to show it to the slave traders. He didn't respond to their taunts. Was Fred facing them with indomitable spirit? Or should he have begged them for mercy? Or yelled at them that he wasn't scared of them? And finally, when Fred escaped by train, he was scared every minute of the trip that someone would recognize him and turn him into the bounty hunters. If he did succeed, he would be all on his own in New York, friendless, homeless, and broke. Did seeing it through and claiming his liberty help Fred develop indomitable spirit as his personal strength? I'd like you to think those questions over and email me the answer to one of them. Let me know what you think. Thank you for joining me for this lesson. And I will look forward to getting together again next time.